Hey everybody, this is Vinsanity. I'm at a facility right here in Wairika. Just at a friend's place. Got some of my stuff, his stuff all together. And it's where we train when I'm in Wairika. Anyways, this video is to my friend Sabra. And Sabra basically has asked me some questions concerning my definition of capitalism. How do I define it? How do I define socialism? What are the advantages and disadvantages of capitalism? The advantages and disadvantages of socialism? Basically also, what have I studied on both socialism and capitalism? With how much time have I taken into studying? Basically, she's really nice, and she's calling me on the carpet just to find out, basically just trying to make me accountable and bring, and the thing is, all of us should be taken to task instead of just blurting out, this is how things are. We got to kind of substantiate what we're saying. So I don't mind these questions whatsoever. A little nervous about answering them because they're not the type of things you could give a meme answer to. They can be entailed. So, and also she wanted to know what countries I've studied socialism and the variants, like how much, what books, since I haven't been to some socialist countries, perhaps how do I come about my information and make such judgments against socialism? Okay, first off, Sabra and all you guys out there, I'm going to try to keep it simple, and let's talk about the first basic thing of what I think capitalism is. Actually, it's what's also defined in some dictionaries and some economic books. Some people take issue with it and disagree. But first off, capital is not just products and equipment. It's basically, capital is money. Can be sometimes called capital. When a company says I need more capital reserves, they mean generally more money. It could be gold, silver, or basically fiat currency. And hopefully the fiat currency be nice if it actually had true value. So, basically it's an exchange. Some people say it's commerce. That what I'm talking about is not capitalism, it's commerce. Like when I want to sell this cup of coffee. I want to sell it to you guys. I bought it for $1. I want to sell it for $2. Trying to make a profit. I don't have any employees helping me with this. I'm not making any money off any person, except for the people who pick the beans and so forth and so on. Now, obviously, that's part of capitalism. The people who pick the beans and so forth. Even a woman I know who believes that, let's try to keep this brief. Jeez, this is going to take a long time. Okay. It's about making money. And basically, Sabra and all of you out there, the first thing, so you don't have to listen to all my torturous explanations of things, is I think the best form of capitalism and socialism. Capitalism is making money, making a profit, making money, selling this, selling a service, selling whatever, to make money of which you could use to purchase other things with, to pay your rent, to pay your utilities, to put aside for your kids' college fund, to pay for disability insurance, to buy clothes, okay? That's a good form of capitalism. Nobody would fault anybody for doing what they could, as long as they were honorable, not committing theft, to try to get the things they need honorably, right? Nobody would fault you for doing that. And socialism is a distribution of wealth. Now, in the strictest sense, and a lot of my friends who are laissez-faire capitalists or they're purists or whatever, they don't like what I'm about to say. They think this will cloud the issue. But socialism, generally, the way we're looking at it, what's fearful for me, is socialism by government mandate. The distribution of wealth from certain groups of people to other groups of people into a social system, into government agencies, into organizations that is set up, hopefully, allegedly, hopefully, for people's the people's benefit, like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. So that's government mandated. I don't like government mandated capitalism or socialism. The only thing I would like to see government involved in is I am one of those people who do believe in laws and regulations. Some purist capitalist or even socialist or anarchist do not like regulations or rules. Well, we're a nation of rules. We're people. We do need rules. We got to make sure that people play by certain rules, don't break the laws, don't commit theft. That's a rule. You break it, you go to jail. You commit theft, you commit fraud. We need those laws. We need those regulations. When you take away those regulations or change it, sometimes things can get dicey. So I would like as little interaction with government. I'm a person who believes in small government. I believe in government. We need government. We need to pay our taxes, whether you're rich or middle class or whatever. I think people who make under a certain amount of money shouldn't have to pay taxes, perhaps. I'm open to that. I don't think it's necessary that everybody has to pay taxes. Some people say, well, everybody should pay a flat tax. Okay, regardless. Taxes need to be collected to maintain roads and bridges, those infrastructures. Taxes need to be collected for fire departments. Taxes need to be collected for police departments, paramedics, for public utilities, so that we have some sort of system of getting electricity to our citizens in the city, whatever. I would argue we don't need as many taxes as that's being collected. So that is something that some of my purist capitalist people that I know don't like, the idea that even those taxes have to be collected, that if you don't pay it, they don't like the idea it's at a force by the point of a gun. But most of the people I know are pretty reasonable, say, yes, we'll pay those taxes. We need those roads. We need health, we need hospitals and municipalities and so forth, emergency rooms. Okay, so that's government mandated. I would argue, I would love to see that we didn't even need government for any of that somehow privately amongst ourselves we could provide all that without taxes. And just have like a council of elders and wise people who could help make certain decisions. Maybe like in Switzerland, there's just basically everything's done by council, and people, if they're elected and in and out in 6 months or a year, they're just basically figureheads. Anyways, that's how I like it. So Saber and I were talking about co-opting for houses, and we were talking about how can we figure out where we come up with money. She comes up with some money, I come up with some money, some other people come up with money. Let's say 5 of us come up with money to buy a 5-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. Okay? And so we buy the house, and it'd be nice if we could all come up with enough money to pay it off completely, because then we would have a place free and clear. But that's a cooperation, that's a co-op. Okay? So if we were doing it for ourselves and each other to live in it, that would be a little bit of socialism, but mainly it's using capitalistic instruments, money, to buy another capitalistic instrument, property, to live in it and be fairly secure, doing better than what's happening for most citizens. And it's not done at the point of a gun. It's done between honorable people looking to work. Now, her and I also talked about, and other people, not just her and I, but there's other people have talked about this, and it's been brought up, and it's even been done in some areas to a small degree, is going out into the city, going out in the area and buying properties, taking that property off the market. Because the problem with property, forget about capitalism, the evils of capitalism or the benefits of capitalism. One of the most daunting things that's facing our society today, I don't care if you think you believe in socialism or capitalism, whatever, the one thing we're all faced is a shortage of affordable housing. And part of that is because there's a shortage of housing, period. And I'm going to say, a lot of people think it's because it's set up because of capitalism that way. That's not true. What it is, although I will say this, because of the shortage, the capitalists on top of the food chain, the big corporations, the people who get together, are more likely to take advantage of that situation and benefit. And I don't mean necessarily by them owning all the properties and renting it out. Some people are under the impression that most properties are owned, most rentals are owned by big conglomerate corporations who just own all of downtown. I mean, you may find that in some cities, and I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but properties always move around, things move around, people always need an influx of cash. The majority of people who own rentals are mom and pops, family members, friends, whatever. People get together, a small cluster of business owners, maybe one person. So what they do is they go out and they buy a property, and maybe they buy 4 or 5 properties. And people always assume, oh, you got 4 or 5 properties, you must be really raking it in. Usually that's not the case. That was not the case in my situation when I owned several properties. Fact is, let me clarify, I did not own those properties. I was leveraged and owed money to the banks. The banks owed them. You don't own a property until you pay it off. And in a way, you really never truly own property as long as you are required to pay property tax. So whether you're rich or poor, you're top of the food chain, low of the food chain, you got to pay property taxes. Now, some people think that big property owners, the really wealthy, the big fat cats, don't pay property taxes because of capitalism. And I will say that that's corporate corporatism or statism, corporate statism, corporate cronyism. That's only occurs not because capitalism exists. It only occurs because of corrupt public officials or stupid, well-meaning public officials. Okay? So in a way, capitalism is no different than a gun. A gun just lays there. It lay there. The potential for all sorts of things resides in that gun. Good, bad. Maybe it's just laying there dormant for a while. You get one person who uses that gun, and they may use it as a tool to produce food, the procurement of food. Or maybe they might, in an emergency situation, have to point it at somebody to keep them away. Yes, I have this tool, leave me alone. Other people could go on a killing spree with it. Maybe they go into combat. Maybe they misuse that tool. And of course, just like recently with Jesse Smollett or some other people, some people commit heinous crimes and get away with these heinous crimes because they have they know people in political power, people of money, or specifically people with political power. So it's just a tool. So my favorite part with Saber and I were talking about was going out, purchasing properties, getting a whole bunch of us, or some of us, to put a down payment on a property, and then people like myself looking for ways to raise money to pay it off and then turn over that property to people who are, say, on a limited income, who could not afford a house with the current rents or mortgages the way they are. But if we owned a house outright, let's say Saber and I and a bunch of other people were to purchase these houses, and we pay them off, we could charge any kind of rent. If we went to sell it, we could charge any kind of mortgage, and we could actually charge, we don't have to charge any percent. We could charge whatever percent. We have a lot more leeway because the banks aren't involved. The government's not involved. Well, the government could get involved and disallow this. That's the fear. So my fear is with government can always screw up good, honest capitalists and reward dishonest, corrupt capitalists. They could always screw up good, honest socialists, and I'm talking about the socialism at the level that I'm going to explain, or nourish a Venezuela. So the fact of the matter is again, socialism. So what Saber and I are looking to do, and some other people we talked about, we're looking to use capitalistic instruments, money. I have built an infrastructure to sell things, books, T-shirts, this and that, to generate money for this purpose. So, as a person who understands capitalism to a modest degree, and I've worked, I can't express to you how many thousands and thousands of hours and years of thought that I put into this, to use capitalistic instruments, not at the point of a gun, not for tax purposes or anything like that, and not for greed. Like some people think, well, you're just being greedy. Well, maybe I am greedy. I am greedy to see that people are taken care of. I have this overabundance of this lusty need to see society more on terms where people could not feel so unsafe and marginalized and so forth. So if that's greedy, then greedy be I. But that's using capitalism for social benefit without the government being involved and forcing that, without government mandate. To me, that is the cleanest, most moral way of how I like to approach capitalism and social benefit. Some people I would call that socialism. Other people say, no, not until the government gets involved is it socialism. Whatever works for you, but you see the benefit. Using my money, my resources, and hopefully collaborating with other people who will come up with money in the manner that they best are able to come up with money to go in and get these properties, get people in there, people who basically normally be paying $600 a month are now paying $300 a month. Their job, if they could barely afford $600 a month, would leave them nothing left over. So it could be argued they don't have a living wage under that environment. But in an environment where they're paying 50% of that, and then you also have other methods of bringing necessary things into their lives that is affordable, that is not affordable now, like education. If you can make their education affordable without getting a government involved, then it's all the better. So, yes, Abra, that's what I think about. That's my definition of optimal capitalism for me. I don't want to force other people and say everybody's got to do it that way, or else they need to be hated or whatever. I believe in a little bit of social evolution. I think if something really has merit, and the people behind it are moral and have merit and willing to sacrifice and work hard, I think something like that would really take off. Because let's look at the one house, 5 bedrooms, 5 people. Let's say they're paying $1,500 a month instead of $3,000 a month as a collective. So the house is paid off. Make sure you pay the property taxes, some other odds and ends. So besides, then you get into another house, which you have more ability of doing because you have property, and that looks good for getting a loan for another house. You have property that's paid off, which really looks good. You got an income of $1,000 a month after repairs, this and that, and property taxes. And you also have the ability, say you and I have found maybe certain ways we have ideas of generating income using certain capitalistic instruments, or you could go out and ask for charity, people to donate. But more than likely, the people who donate have made that money from certain capitalistic instruments. That's all done, not at the point of a gun, all done amongst people, a social cohesion, socialism without government, social cohesion to engage in capitalistic instruments, money, properties, towards the end goal of social benefit. That's what I like to see. And what I understand is that, what I know is we don't need the government to be involved with that. We don't need any politician to save us. Because history has shown they haven't done it so far. All you got to do is go back and look at the recordings of every speech by every presidential candidate, every person who's become president, all the things they promised, and we're no closer to the dreams of affordable education, affordable health care, affordable housing. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Now I was reading one of the posts where somebody was kind of pointing out, I think it was to Phoenix, somebody was pointing, I forget who was pointing it out, that they were saying that his philosophy is one of greed. And I don't believe that. In fact, just somebody, for instance, is it greedy, really, for somebody to say, I want to make as much money as I can without political pull, without fraud, without theft, doing something that doesn't destroy the environment? And then, is it also greedy to want to to invest and set up situations where I or he or you or whatever could help other people? Is that greedy? Or is that moral? You decide. Like, for instance, back in the day, when I was, and somebody has said this, is that almost everybody, when they're young, almost everybody, are socialist or communist. They just, because the thing is just in some of us, it's in our nature to want to heal, to love, to give, to help, to so forth. And some of us are just starry-eyed. Like when I read the book Stranger in a Strange Land, Michael Valentine Smith's fascination with money and how liquid it was and what a tool it was and how it could be used. And I admired that he was the kind of character, he didn't really care about material things. I'm not saying material things that are totally sinful. This computer is a material thing and I use it, right? The weights, it's a material thing. These are experiential tools, But if you were to ever go in a house, when I had a house way back when, you would go in and say, it would look like a gym, or the furniture looked like it came from a landfill because that's where it came from. I was not a materialist. I was like this one, I forget the leader's name right now, but he was the guy, his people lived in yurts, and his only concession to wealth was a mobile, or at his home base, a wooden yurt. It was shaped like a yurt. It was a little bit bigger than the others. It was wooden, and that was more for security because he had people always trying to, other people trying to sneak in to assassinate him. But he would give all his wealth, his material wealth, to his people. He was all about experiences and building an empire and building, leaving a legacy. So he was a bit of a sensualist and an experientialist and a social engineer who thought that wealth was only to be used for the benefit of building a society and spreading the wealth to his people. So I kind of admired that. I still do. And I admired Valentine Smith's idea of using money, blending spiritualism under the guise of religion with money to inspire people all around them to be more in control of their bodies, of their minds, of their emotions, to basically be totally self-actualized and realize that what's holding people back is fear, is over-competitiveness. Competitiveness can be good, but over-competitiveness based on possessiveness and jealousy and overweening territoriality. So his whole thing is once people could grok each other and get together and grok themselves and love one another, money was just a tool to facilitate that. Oh, do you guys need more beds? Let's grab the cash. Do we have to buy huge supplies of food? Grab the cash. And he had a way of all of them working together. They always had an abundance of money because they weren't materialists. They were experientialists, striving and aspiring towards becoming evolved. So to me, that's my whole journey for capitalism. And that, believe it or not, a lot of people struggle with that. And they want that. They want that amount of, that's what they want. So I don't think just people who become, because they become rich, are selfish. So anyways, to get back to how many books have I read about capitalism? Hundreds. And I've been on Wikipedia and I've seen lectures and quite frankly, to be honest, most of the books I've read that I really read over and over are favorable and talk about the benefits of capitalism. But there are dangers to capitalism, dangers to any ism, if misused, if you got corrupt people involved, specifically if government's there to fertilize and protect and to embed or to sleep with such corrupt people. Just remember again, if we didn't purchase and vote with our dollars and our feet in like with Walmart, and if politicians weren't involved, Walmart would not be the entity in many communities that it is. Okay? And I'm not saying that all the politicians in each community made mistakes or were corrupt. A lot of the politicians will make decisions to get companies in without requiring them to pay taxes because the constituents want jobs. They want jobs. And so they out of desperation or whatever, and it can be argued, people could argue that was wrong. People say, well, Walmart wouldn't have stayed. And so far as Walmart goes, I think Walmart would come in anyways. As far as Sony and Hyundai and all these others, if they have a place that's going to give them a better deal, they're going to go to that other place. That's just the way it is. So, I don't like to second guess mayors and city council and local politicians and poo-poo every little thing that they do, because sometimes they have to make the tough choices. That said, when you have a corporation, a competition, let me backpedal a little bit. Let me digress a little bit, you guys. We'll get back to capitalism as selling one thing. Okay, I hear so many people. Part of the thing that bothers me isn't so much that yes, we should be concerned in the potential where capitalism could go. Not capitalism itself, but since capitalism is an instrument, and since it's an instrument that can be misused by certain people. And again, I want to emphasize, if certain people acquire a certain amount of money and power, and the way they acquire that power is campaign donations, is maybe a little bit of, here you go, wink wink, here's a junket, or you may find a nice little account in the Bahama Islands for you. There's all sorts of ways for people that have wealth and money slip to them into some other place. It's really not that hard, because we don't have the resources, and quite frankly, the powers that be aren't trying to look too closely at the other powers that be, so that stuff wouldn't happen. Like the real estate bubble of 2008 and all this toxic debt that would happen. The only reason why it happened was government was involved. Okay, or sometimes government doesn't get involved when it should, because we do have laws that are supposed to keep people from breaking the law. But for some odd reason, the top 0.01% that was involved with engineering the Wall Street fiasco, they didn't serve any jail time. You and I would have, so we'd be in prison still. They did not serve any jail time. In fact, we bailed them out, and these guys gave themselves raises and just laughed their asses off at us. They could not have done that without our politicians. Do you think we would have done that? The masses of people? That's when Occupy got started. Do you think the Occupy movement would have said, let's bail you out? No. They would have strung those guys up. But they got paid with our money. They got bailed out. We were forced to bail them out at the point of a gun from government. And we're not talking about the top 1%. Because the top 1%, if you make it 300 and some thousand, close to 400,000, that will barely get you in the threshold of the top 1%. And most people who are the top 1% today weren't there ever before this year. And they won't be there next year and ever again. There's a lot of changeover, especially when you're in the lower echelons. That's just the way it is. And if you're in the top 1% this year, regardless if you didn't been there before and won't be there ever again next year and after, or you stay there and you reside there for years, let's look at that wealth. That wealth was those people who created jobs, who created businesses, spent thousands and thousands and thousands of hours. They may have dedicated their whole life towards the goal of becoming a big exec, an inventor, an entrepreneur, a CEO, or whatever. A lot of CEOs, it's not like they just bonged out in high school and smoked bongs all the way through and piss farted around and just basically took a few courses at community college and all of a sudden found their way in getting $30 million by it doesn't happen that way. When you look at the CEOs who are involved, they, in my opinion, they put in the time and effort that they basically say, I will enslave myself to this position. So in my mind, the $30 million that they're making a year is not worth the amount of work that they put in. And here's a guy who's put in thousands and thousands of hours to different projects. So, but that 30 million, people think, oh, he's hoarding that 30 million. He's hoarding the millions he could give to us. And the fact of the matter is, that money, for those guys to stay rich, they have to constantly invest. They're like sharks. Capitalists are like sharks. If they don't keep swimming, they're going to become poor. I mean, if you just, unless they have like, say, $40 million laying in a vault, and then they live off that, then okay, then basically they don't have to work. Now, that might be a hard and distasteful for you guys to understand or to believe. I don't think that's necessarily the most optimal, but I think we get into some pretty sketchy, dangerous areas if we start saying how much should people be allowed to make. Then that starts becoming, it doesn't go to a good place. Now, I think, aside from property rights, I struggle with this, I'm going to be honest with you. There's some people who believe that capitalists should not own property, and I believe it depends on the property. Like, I don't think Nestle should own the water rights and rivers and so forth to the water and then sell us back water at a profit. I think that's part of the common public good, So in that sense, I don't think we should have that kind of unfettered capitalism, because that's really not, that has no good for the common. That's just not, I don't think that's good. And the same with certain minerals and so forth and so on. I mean, maybe they get lease mineral rights, but even then I can understand where people get a little hedgy. But the fact is, what bothers me is, you have these companies that they call on corporate welfare, and people are really right to be outraged by such corporate welfare. And and they'd be surprised to learn that people who want to be honorable capitalists, and I think there is such a thing as honorable capitalists, in a sense, they don't want unfair, uneven, unbalanced government pull. They don't want anybody who says, look at these companies getting this government welfare. That's unfair. That's not right. Of course, it's not right. We shouldn't accept that. But that doesn't mean a person who owns a deli, or owns a purse factory, or owns even a rental or whatever, is in the same category. They're just not. That's just like good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, two different categories. You can't put it in the same. Is it possible that somebody who owns rentals today could find themselves linked up with other evil people trying to rule the world and with too much political pull? Sure. You always have bad actors, but you have bad actors who are in every socioeconomic group. So, again, getting back to the concept, there are a lot of people who hate capitalists. And so I'm like, okay, so what do you do for a living? They get a little nervous. They say, well, that's none of your business. Well, no, if we're going to be open and transparent, and if I'm going to open up my life and you're going to call me on the carpet and demand to know where I'm coming from, I like to know the type of character and person that I'm talking to. So, do you work for a capitalist? Yeah, I work for a capitalist. So that you're getting paid by a capitalist, and they say, well, I have to. Well, of course, I understand that. Sure you do. I mean, you don't have to, but in a way, you kind of do if you have kids and so forth, or you want to eat. I understand. I don't get on anybody for saying, it's not at the point of a gun. People can make certain choices, but quite frankly, we're all under a lot of pressure to survive. And so working for somebody, for a company, even working for a company, it's really a shitty company as far as morally and ethically and environmentally and everything. You do what you can to support your family. That's just it. You shouldn't beat yourself up over that, really. So you work for a corporation. Or I know a guy who's a lawyer who's always talking about the greedy politicians that won't let anybody live, and he can't afford this, and he's this and that. And I'm like, dude, you work 40, according to you work 40 to 60 hours a week, you charge $200 an hour. If you're broke, something's wrong. So don't, and if you're using interns for free labor, then in a way it can be argued you're being exploitive too. So we got to kind of watch when we're pointing fingers at each other, because, they say don't judge lest you be judged. I say judge, and allow yourself to be judged and be called on the carpet and say, okay, you want to bring me on the carpet. Let's examine what I'm doing. So these people who are talking about greed, like for instance, they think it's evil to utilize the labor of other people to make money. They don't think it's right that you should make money on other people's labor. Well, here's a sad fact. Maybe it's not sad. A lot of the people who have jobs, you got so many people who go, I want a job. Will somebody just give me a job? What's the government doing? Why isn't the government creating an environment where we can have jobs? Well, the government itself can't create jobs. All they can do is give tax breaks and make the pie sweeter for companies to come in or people to invest. That's all they can do. And I would rather they stayed out of it, quite frankly. Because on one hand, they do things wrong and it has unintended consequences that turn out to be bad, if not right away, down the road. People in the community, as some people say, what the demands of the market are the people. And you know, people, the market, that's just a myth. No, people, it's not a myth. If all of a sudden people start wanting more and more cocoa butter, then you're going to find people who are going to say, I want to supply, to get that supply. I want to make sure I can make some money and supply people cocoa butter, because a lot of people want it. So that puts pressure on people who want to make money, who don't have a job. They want to have their own business, get cocoa butter. Then they try to sell the cocoa butter for as much as they can, and they will not be able to sell it for any more than what people are willing to pay for it. That's just a simple rule. So we do influence each other, and so that's the thing about that portion of labor. So even this woman I know who makes arts and crafts, she uses leather goods and all that, and she says, I just don't want to exploit and make money on people's labor. But she made a slight concession. So the thing is that when you get leather, even if it's sheets of leather, you are basically, that comes from the labor of the person who was tilling the pastures, for the people who are running the cattle through the pastures, for the people who are getting grain, growing the corn, bought by the people feeding the cattle and with the pasture. And, so all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of people who are making money, and they've got other people involved, and then you get involved. So we're all working together, we're all making money. Now, she would argue, but I didn't pay these people directly. They weren't under my payroll. I just paid them, then I got it, I made these purses and stuff, and people bought it from me. Well, that's true, that's fair enough. However, imagine a world, and I can tell you a scenario, where you have everybody's creating purses and wallets and maybe leather hats and vests, arty stuff maybe. Each one of those items require a lot of time, talent, effort, and so forth. It requires a lot, and the person who's making it has put a lot of time. They spent thousands of hours learning how to learn those skills. So they're getting paid, even if they charge what you may think is too much, you're paying them for the thousands and thousands of hours they were trained over the years to get to that level of skill. So that's what that represents. The sad thing is that it's a crapshoot, because sometimes a person can spend all their time learning a discipline. They think it's going to be valuable. Nobody's interested ever. Or they get into a market where they go, I got a market. I got a lot of people buying these purses for $600 a purse, and I've only put in 10 hours, okay, and I spent X amount. That's great. Then they find out whether there's more competition competing with them or not, that people all of a sudden lost the taste for that purse, and it's all of a sudden that person has all this inventory and they can't get rid of. Or if all of a sudden you have everybody decides nobody wants to work for anybody and nobody wants to employ anybody because they don't want to be exploitive. So everybody's making similar stuff. So then you find out, you go down to one big giant farmer's market, and all of a sudden you got similar stuff, and you're competing with all these people, and God bless you, none of you exploited a worker to make any income. You just used your own time, and then you find out that you're competing with these other people, and then all of a sudden it's not scarcity, it's an overabundance of things, and so your product doesn't have as much value because people are always trying to get a better deal. Because they got to save their money, their resources. If they want to buy things, they got to make sure they spend as wisely as possible, so they have capital reserves for other things, maybe for a health insurance or whatever. So it's not easy. It's always risky for everybody, whether you're selling and have no employees and making products, or whether you decide to go into business and have employees. Now, this one person I'm thinking of, a lot of you people know her. She's very bright, very gifted. She believes that anybody who has employees that's a business needs, they must, it's a mandate, it's a moral imperative that they pay at least minimum wage and give vacation, paid vacation, and maternity leave, and a retirement fund, and all this stuff. Well, that's great if the person can pull it off, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they can't do any of that. Sometimes they can't even pay minimum wage. Sometimes you got people who are basically barely making ends meet, and they find somebody else who's also not able, doesn't have any skills to make crafts, can't make it, he can't sell anything. So he says, oh yeah, I'll work for you. Tell me what to do. So that person says, well, I'll pay you $10 an hour. Sorry, it's not 15, but it's 10. And, you know, that's provided, of course, that you get these things done in X amount of time. Everybody's forced to. Now, if somebody says, I got this job because I was forced to, it's like a gun to my head, I had to do it. Or I got into this rental agreement because I just, you know, my wit's end, I had no other choice. But that goes both ways. The person with the business sometimes who's giving $10 an hour instead of 15 may actually have no choice. May have no choice. And to get government agencies involved to kind of inventory and audit over and over with great frequency that would be needed to make sure that this person couldn't indeed pay more than $10, or let's say he could pay $10 to 15 today, but maybe his lease goes up. Maybe the materials and cost of doing business goes up. All of a sudden, he's not able to pay that 15. So, but he's got to, because the law says he has to. So he goes out of business. That's why, another reason why government doesn't work seamlessly enough. It doesn't work fast enough. It doesn't work smart enough to handle all the nuances and the rigors of each individual person or company and so forth. All it could do at best, and should, is create rules to keep people from ripping each other off and being dishonest. That's my opinion, okay? I mean, it's just like in Seattle. We're calling Seattle a dying city now. You have a lot of businesses that were up there, and, you know, you get people who go into a business. It takes, the majority of people will fail at a business in 2 years. In fact, most people who are successful at business failed several times at other businesses. Sometimes the same business they tried a couple times, they failed, or they tried different things and they failed. And, you know, it's not like, it's not like the government pays you negative income tax for failing at businesses. You may be able to write everything off and thereby say, well, at least I could feed myself. But like, let's say you lose $50,000 and you make $25,000, but, you know, overall you lost 50. Well, because of the way it's set up when you're first starting out, you may not have to pay taxes on that 25. You may get it back. You know, it depends on the tax structure and when it's implemented and all sorts of things. But a lot of people who get some sort of tax benefits, it's not like a preferred thing for most people to have failing businesses. Maybe the big corporate people at the top end, the people in the higher the food chain, they work things out to where that's how they make money, by scamming and so forth. But again, that couldn't happen without government, somebody, some agencies, entities helping them along with something that you and I think is unfair. So the whole thing about getting somebody to work for you. So now it's like, in India, they had grinding poverty. Even after Gandhi was instrumental, one of my heroes, kicking the Brits out. Now the British, under their rule, in many ways, the standard of living, from what I understand, from what I read, and maybe other books would say the opposite. So I don't think we should get too buggered down by if there's conflicting information out there. But from what I've talking to some people from India and some historians, is that people's quality of life in some way was better under the British for a while than after Gandhi kicked them out. Of course, you know, I think there might have been a big social correction, a big economic correction. But the bottom line is they go in these villages and they all had the wheels, the weaving wheels. So basically it was a situation where everybody was creating their own products, just like for farmers markets. And because of what we said, everybody had the same thing to sell. And some people didn't sell, some people couldn't work the wheel as fast as other people. Some people couldn't keep their overhead down. But overall, nobody did that well on there until other sharp entrepreneurs came in with machines, with people, with computers, and they started getting, they started hiring a lot of these people who couldn't really support themselves by themselves. And so the economy went up. But then again, all of a sudden you have an owner of a business who's a boss and somebody who has to essentially take orders in a sense if they want to receive a paycheck. That's what people kind of bristle about. And it's like, oh, you know, I got to work for somebody. Somebody's got their boot on my neck. But there are a lot of people out there who would basically say, hey, I'm okay with that. Or I might resent it, but I want somebody to hire me. Now, nowadays we got a lot of people who go, I don't want to be a wage slave and work for anybody. And, you know, it's not my fault that I don't have any skills, or it's not my fault that the skills I have aren't marketable because you got too many people who have the same skills, or nobody wants my stuff. It's not my fault. Most likely it's not. That's not the issue. It's not fair. The universe isn't fair. But what's really be really unfair and worse if everybody got paid and was given, said, okay, everybody deserves a 3-bedroom house with a big lawn, with the water running all the time so you have a green lawn, and you know, we'll give you X amount of money so you could just consume things and keep up with the Joneses and the Smiths and the Rockefellers, and that's not sustainable either. So no easy answers. No easy answers. And I know because, you know, I've been poor most of my life. And, you know, I used to work until I got a job at a post office. I never made, you know, except as a personal trainer, I've never made more than minimum wage. So, but, you know, just because you make great wages doesn't mean that you're going to just ensure a high standard of living and that you'll be rich and your life is secure. Okay? Because I used to work with people who, at the post office, and it's weird how people's perceptions, how gratitude has a very short half-life. A lot of these people never worked at a good job before the post office either. But with the mind talk, and this is what kind of upsets me and breaks my heart about a lot of people who are so hateful of capitalism and those with more, and just assume that people are more greedy. That's very unsettling, and it's unfair just to assume that anybody who strives to make money and is either doing it, they're crooks, or they're evil, or they're greedy, or they had an unfair advantage, or something. It's almost, to me, it's as evil as racism. Really, it's profiling, and that's, you know. And we can always point out there's one individual that here and there that is greedy, that had an unfair advantage. They inherited money. Everything in life just worked well for them. You always have those cases, but by and large, the majority of people who build their wealth did it honestly, did it from a lot of hard work. And yet a lot of people just assume that, oh, I didn't have the money, I only made minimum wage. And I'll tell you what, it's a lot harder to become rich on minimum wage in some ways, if you look at this perspective, than it is at the post office. So if you work at the post office, it's still not like a guarantee. Like for me, I had to pay, and now don't get me wrong, I almost became a millionaire until I ran into some problems with the government and as far as the postal service and keeping my job. So the whole thing is that I still wasn't like, hey, I make all this money and I could just start swimming in real estate. No, because real estate, everything's rising pretty quickly, and rate of inflation, costs, taxes, property taxes, cost of everything's rising quicker than even anybody with a high paying job. The COLAs that we got did not even keep up with the rate of inflation. So to keep ahead of the rate of inflation and to have money, what a person has to do is be like Ben Franklin, his philosophy, and a lot of immigrants who come in here. They live like very Spartan lifestyles. Like I used to buy a year's supply of beans and rice. All these grains and rice and bags, 100-pound bags, And that's what I decided to do. After wasting my money for 2 years, partying, eating out, reading books. I didn't buy material things, but I just spent it all because money's easy to spend and waste. If you know, and you don't even have to be a overindulgent person by nature. Just if you're not paying attention, it disappears. It's just like diet. If you're not paying attention to what you eat, you forget about that chocolate eclair you had. You know, even though the rest of your diet is good because by habit you eat really good. So we got to pay attention to things. It's not a moral. When people don't pay attention, it's not because they're morally unfit or that they're lazy. We get distracted. That's how we are. And that's not fair, but that's just how it is. So, you know, so that one person who was telling Phoenix, I think it was telling Phoenix that he was being greedy and that he was able to get the wealth that he got based because he stood on the heads. He basically benefited from the efforts of people before him. Well, that may or may not be true. Not sure what that means. I mean, he didn't inherit money. The standard of living was good that allowed him to do it. But there are other people who came into this country who did not have this benefit of a postal income. And they got together, and these people, because they worked together, far outstripped the amount of money that he made. And making like a third of what he made. So they made a third, they come into the country, they make a minimum wage, and within the same period of time, they end up having 3 times his wealth, or a lot of Americans' wealth, who made more money. And why is that? Well, generally, some people are smarter than others, but that's not the case. A lot of times people, it's not just about being smart, it's just that one person, one group of people could be working with each other and living more frugally and working harder and longer hours and networking with other people when, say, someone like Phoenix may be distracted with wife and kids and this and that and so forth. All sorts of variables. So would you say that the person who's making less than minimum wage got that because he was basically benefited from, you know? So in area up-market, things happen. And it's true. You know, it's not fair, and I agree for that. And this is the reason why, Sabra, that I really, you know, a lot of people do have gripes, legitimate gripes, that it's not fair that the market is such that it makes it really hard for people to afford housing, whereas in previous decades it wasn't as hard. All the more reason why I really liked when we were talking about co-opting for property and helping people get affordable property. So my biggest thing isn't to say that people who haven't done what some other entrepreneurs have lack the discipline. It's not because they're lazy, it's not because they're stupid, it's not because they're uncaring or any of these things. It is indeed a tough situation out there. It really is. It's a very tough situation. I'm not one of those people who say anybody who pulls themselves up by their bootstraps is guaranteed to make it. That is simply not true. You know, it's simply not true. And it's certainly tough to do and hard when you don't have friends that you network with. If your friends aren't on board and everybody's not helping each other, like you and I were talking about that we should try to do and try to get everybody in, because that's the only way we're going to make this work, by the way, Sabra, is the only way we're going to make this work is we're going to have to do what the immigrants have done, what other people could hopefully be doing. But the thing is, all these people who, I don't want to point a finger, you need to do this and gather a bunch of people, because the hardest thing to do is to gather a bunch of people. You know, you go through your life and you find out, my God, I'm 60 years old and I don't have any friends or relatives or hardly anybody that share my values and so forth. But even if they share my values, they're off on their own gig. They don't have the time, resources, or inclination to partner up with me. So when the majority of the people that you love are either doing poorly, they don't have the means, they don't have the effort, they're broken, they're whatever, maybe they're greedy, maybe they're selfish, who knows, they don't have the means, or the other people who have a pretty good job who actually can't get started. They make good money, but they spend everything they make, and they're just, aside from working 40 hours a week, they just don't have it within them to get involved and do a co-op thing. So I don't want to be one of those people pointing out and saying, well, if I was nearly rich, you could do it too. But on the other hand, I don't want to say that you can't. I don't want to tell people, well, don't even bother trying because, you're probably broken. If you haven't done it by now, you're just broken. I mean, you're not lazy, but you're probably just not quite up to it. And I don't want to tell people that because I'm on one hand, something else that some of the people will say is on one hand, I used to believe and still want to believe this, is that not only are we all worthy to try, that we're all have the right, we should all have the right to seek happiness. And maybe we shouldn't have the right to demand that other people provide us with everything, but we have the right to try to be a captain of our own destiny, to try and work towards happiness. And I used to believe that we all have unlimited potential, and I still believe we have such amazing potential that we rarely tap into. And I used to always believe that if I found the right method, the right formula, the right this, and this, and put in the right time, I could become as smart as anybody in any field. I could do any kind of musical instrument. I could speak dozens of languages. I could do anything. Well, not so sure about that. Now, most people would, on one hand, would say, don't ever say that we're all equal, we all have equal ability, or the potential for equal ability. But then on the other hand, these same people, they may tell, depending on who they're talking to or how they feel like their back's against the wall, they may say, how dare you say a woman can't do this or a man can't do that or this race can't do that, this race is better than this. How dare you say any of this? We're all equal. Okay, great. So then you get some people who believe that, or maybe they're being disingenuous and they're trying to use that as a weapon against the people who say, well, we're all equal. And so these people may have said to me they're all equal, and I say, yeah, right on, we're all equal, we can all do it, and let's do it. And then there's somebody else speaks to them, and they'll say, not everybody has the capacity or the genetics. So on one hand, the same people, depending on what pressures they're facing, will say turn that around to 180, and that's kind of frustrating. The fact is, it doesn't matter how much ability we may have innately or whatever, in a way, is that we could find ways to compensate, to accommodate. It's like when I was in the Marines, and I was legally blind for years, and I found a way to become a sharpshooter, but I had to accommodate certain things and use certain tricks that people with good vision didn't have to do. And it took me a lot longer and harder. There's a lot of examples I could give to that. But, so Sabra, in closing on this, the whole thing about the co-op, if we can simply find a way in our generation to find a way where every person, if they want it, because there's some people who just like living like feral, it's romantic for them to live like on a feral level out there in the elements. I don't think they're the majority. I think they're very minority. And people who want to do that, I don't think they're necessarily mentally ill. That's just how some people are. That's the kind of diversity humans have. But I believe if we could have it set up to where in one generation or less, and I think it could be less, if we had people that work together, we all work together, and we could help provide for each other, a roof over our heads, affordable education, affordable, not just education, affordable health. There's so many methods that we could use to help each other to achieve that and have the discretionary income, and then that we wouldn't even need the government involved. And I think what would show a true community loving thing is to help each other to do this. And that's why the reason, one of the things I believe so strongly in this is that even though I basically have lost most of my wealth, and ironically I lost most of my wealth to people who were who've been very in love with Marxism and Maoism and so forth for years, who, for whatever reason, despite me working and trying to hold things together, didn't seem too concerned to kind of help out. Like, that one house that I had to sell, you and I talked about it, I wanted to basically get that paid off through using an infrastructure that I've been building and actually move out of it and turn it over to people to start the seed thing that we were talking about. So you got people living there far below market value, use that money, leverage the value of that property to get another place, get more people, and have everybody pay it forward. And then the collecting the properties would build up exponentially. And again, this is capitalism with social intent. So, but like I said, because of the very people and the person I had at another place, I just had to pretty much get rid of everything because I got in crushing debt. Because the very people who cried the loudest that they hated capitalists, and the very people who were basically, quite frankly, they exploited. They got into my circle with the pretense of using, that they needed help, that they were beaten down, but they wanted to help other people, and they were anxious. They couldn't wait to help me help other people. And I just thought, well, how cool is that? People who are broken like me, getting together to use our resources, even if they didn't have money or anything, to have their creativity, to use their time. Because, well, one, they don't have jobs. So if they don't have jobs or they're hardly working at all, they had free time to hand out flyers, to organize and stuff. But you can't make people do anything, regardless of how loving they say they are and so forth. I mean, again, some people think I'm being a little bit harsh, but I'm just speaking facts. These are people who, it costs a lot of money to have somebody afford their Marxist inclinations. The money's coming from somebody, whether it's from me or whether it's cost from the government to take it from other people. When you have people who basically, I guess everybody's got to ask themselves whether you're out of work or not. There are a lot of people out of work who are getting some sort of help, even if it's marginal, and they're barely getting by, of course, sadly. But on the upside, I know a lot of these people who have a lot of free time, and it wouldn't hurt the network. But you can't make people do that. All I can do, and hopefully all you can do too, or not all, but what we're willing to do, is to use our resources. So as you know, I've written a lot of fitness books, and a lot of I've got an infrastructure things going, working with some, believe it or not, working with some capitalists to help sponsor this intention for us to do what we're doing. So you actually have capitalists who are eager to be a part of this, businesses, okay? So, and all sorts of things that they're going to help to bring, make things cheaper for people. When you talk about co-opting on houses too, just to let you, just to talk about it, we don't have to just co-op on houses. People could gather together and co-op, like you have supermarket co-ops, you have pharmaceutical co-ops. People could get enough other people together and bring down insurance rates and say, hey, we're this big entity, and you, the government, you need to change laws and allow us to bargain for cheaper insurance. That's against the law, by the way. People can't join an organization with or form an organization with the sole intent to be able to bargain better insurance rates. And that's because government has allowed certain people to lobby to keep us prisoner. So anyways, I rambled on, Sabra. I hope that answers some of your questions. Later, I'll talk to you about all the research I've done in other socialistic countries. Basically, again, read a lot of books talk about the benefits of capitalism. I get to go on and on about the benefits. You and I and all these other people could actually point out the obvious dangers of corrupt people who misuse capitalism, and only because they have corrupt people in their pocket in politics. So we know that. As of yet, I haven't found one book that actually was able to give a blueprint and show, like some of the capitalist books, how socialism can work, really can be perfect. It would be the perfect way to go. In of itself, about capitalism, socialism cannot survive without other people's money because it doesn't create money itself. Capitalism can survive without socialism. But I believe our society does need socialism, even though some people say socialistic entities, agencies are parasitic. I would point out that in the human body and in an ecosystem like the rainforest, that you have a lot of parasites, or let's just look at our body. There now is a school of thought to show that if we didn't have any cancer cells, or we didn't have any parasites, or we didn't have certain bad bacteria, we wouldn't be as healthy. We need a certain level of dysfunction. We need reminders in our body to keep us on alert, to keep us honest, to keep things going. Okay, and I think that's true in a society. So that's why we do need to have some sort of funding distributed from wealth to help people who are like the veterans. There was a contract. I mean, you're not going to find too many people like you police officers. You go, well, we'll pay an hourly wage, but if you get shot or hurt or whatever, tough luck, buddy. You might have trouble hiring people. So in that, citizens might say, we got to really, okay, we're going to need it. We're going to bite the bullet on this one, no pun intended. We'll bite the bullet and have these guys, if they get injured on the job, that they have all sorts of medical and so forth, just like our armed service people. But we do need certain things for an aging population. I just really lament that we haven't found a way as a community to provide all this for each other without the government involved. It just kind of shows that we need a government, and this really bothers me, is the fact is we need a government to force us to provide for each other, because we lack, I don't know what, the morals, fiber? We lacked the capacity, or we're just not to be trusted, and that bothers me, because that's the reason why I've strived to be there for all my friends. I don't want to be in a situation where I can't be the stand-up person that I've dreamed about wanting to be, or the type of stand-up people I admire. So it really bothers me that we're not providing for ourselves on many levels, because what does it say about us as community, or as humans, or species? What does it say that we haven't done any of that? It just bothers me. And the fact is, it'd be so much cheaper too. It'd just be so much more efficient. Anyways, I want to talk about other issues. This is basically, I just want this video to try to answer your good, clean, honest and questions about, what do I think? Because again, I'm going to be writing like I said, I went off on a tangent. The reason why I'm living in a van right now is I could afford, even though I lost most of my wealth, if I didn't have all that stuff that I did on the side as a capitalist, which I got honestly from thousands of hours of honest hard work, I'd be really screwed. My union really screwed the pooch on with my situation. It was done purposely. I can make a good argument for that. But I have enough money from my investments in annuities, retirement annuities, putting enough time in, and from other things that are restructured. And actually from selling that one place that I want to turn over to the public, it really alleviated a lot of my debt and allowed to free up some other income. So I could afford to live in a small little place and be comfortable. That's all I need. It's all I would want. But the fact is I wouldn't have the money for the projects of which you and I have discussed. I wouldn't have it. And before I die, I'd like to see where someone like you and I, and where all of us would get involved and change the situation for the housing. Truly, I believe if we were to help each other without government interference or help to provide housing for all of us, everything else, it would be easier for all the other things to fall into place. Anyway, Sabra, thanks so much. Okay, kiddo, talk to you later.